So it's Wednesday, March 19th.
Recording in progress.
And we will call the CCRPC Board of Directors meeting to order. Hearing and seeing none. We'll move on to item 2, draft minutes of February 19th, 2025 board meeting, which is in your packet. I'm going to introduce a little update. Don't need action as such as far as the motion is concerned. Distributing. Catherine.
If Josh is here, he can change his own name, but his name is misspelled on the last minutes for Bolton. They dropped the E off of Josh Bessie's name. And then on 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, and the same on 79, 80, 81, and 82. There's a difference between the members attending where it says they're absent, but if you go to the those particular pages I mentioned, it lists them when the vote was taken for the TIP amendment. It mentions them as vacant. Same way with the safety performance targets. So they were either absent but not vacant. And then on 109, I mean, Jackie caught this as well. As it says the commission is too large. It says C. McManus then shared, but the bylaw committee did discuss this topic, but ultimately by trying to right size the ratio of vote distribution, the weighted numbers became too large. It makes more sense.
Yes.
And then 191, it's housing. And then 202 is it instead of is it is aspirational.
Is it aspirational? No question mark. It is aspirational. Thank you.
Yeah.
I wasn't clear again on the vacant versus absent listings. Could you run that by me again?
Yeah, on when we have the who is attending the meeting, it would say like
it says absent. When we recorded MPO voting, for some reason we had vacant next to those towns when they were just absent. So
yeah.
All right.
We need to switch vacant to absent.
Okay. So in this case, we are going to, is there any further corrections that folks note? Go ahead, Garrett.
Just a really important one. Josh lost out on an E, but I gained a T, so maybe we're even.
Oh, didn't catch that one, Garrett. Sorry.
Totally. You would not believe how common that is. No worries. I don't care, but and Josh may not either.
Very good. So
I had a couple, but I sent them to Emma. They were minor, and most of them Catherine caught anyway.
Okay. So then I'm supposed to say that the meeting minutes now stand approved as corrected without any further objections or notations on corrections. And then for who's taking our minutes, Darren? Okay. The new meeting minutes will state the previous meeting minutes were corrected. You do not need to indicate which were the particular corrections, but
well, that's great because I missed some of them.
Oh no!
But that's why we have recordings
and the AI transcript. Very good. All right, so we clear. There is action as such, but it doesn't require motion, doesn't require a vote. By sort of administrative fiat, we make this correction, and then the chair says the meetings stand as written, or the meetings will stand as corrected. Clear?
The world is going to hell in a handbasket because even Robert's rules is getting too informal.
Well, I haven't read much deeper into the whole thing, but I think that hopefully if you guys don't give me too many subsidiary motions, things will be clear enough. Thank you. All right, well, let's move on. We're going to look for agenda item 3. Any members of the public here looking for public comment on items that are not on our agenda tonight? Hearing and seeing none, we're going to move on to item 4, minor tip transportation improvement program amendments. This would be an MPO action, so sorry,
Move.
Garrett. Go ahead, Andy.
Move to approve the consent agenda. Or the minor tip amendments, sorry.
Right, it's on page 9. It wasn't
Yes.
issued as a consent agenda, but it's the Colchester Way Station on page 9, recommended by the TAC for our approval to adjust that to add $67,500 federal funds. Thank you, Andy. Any second? Thank you, Jackie. Discussion.
None on the consent agenda.
That wasn't a consent agenda item.
I made a mistake.
Then I have a question.
Go
Are
ahead.
these unobligated funds? Are they from the interstate basket?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
And hopefully the job site trailer will be repurposed when done. Because we need housing here.
Yeah, I was gonna say tiny house.
Even that, I think the pods are working out in Burlington, are they not, Andy?
So, yeah.
Good to hear. All right, well, let's
I
move.
think this is a permanent trailer, so I think this is the office at the
Okay.
way station. It's not a temporary.
Okay, gotcha. Now, let's hope they aren't, but never mind. The truck drivers were complaining of questioning at way stations over this past few days. Directed questioning of truck drivers. Moving on, we're going to need all those in favor to say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining, please speak up. Thank you. We're going to move to agenda item 5 to authorize the executive committee to warn a public hearing for the UPWP and the budget at 6 p.m. on May 21st board meeting. This is a little of the cart before the horse, because normally we would have you do this, but we're on a bit of a hurry up, and we're asking you to authorize the executive committee to make this public warning. Normally it's the board's responsibility to do these public warnings. So sight unseen, we're asking you to allow the members of the executive board to warn this public hearing. So any questions on that? Sorry if we're a little behind the 8 ball on the timeline for this.
So moved, Chris.
All right, thank you, Mike.
Seconded, this is Garrett.
Thank Garrett. Any further discussion? Then all those in favor, please say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining, please speak up. Thank you. All right, we're going to move to item 6, accepting the fiscal year mid-year financial report.
I'll take this one. Good evening, everybody. So this is a discussion item, not necessarily for action, but we do have numbers.
And may I also
yes.
point out that, again, Robert's 11th edition says that I'm going to classify this as the treasurer's report. This would be in the same vein, yes?
OMG.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and for the record, and Chris and Forrest, I did put this in as an action item so that we could have the board accept it, which I think is more traditional,
Okay.
more consistent with Robert's rules, probably, Chris. I don't know.
Well, they're saying the treasurer's report here in the 11th edition does not require a motion in that it's a statement of fact.
All right, we'll
Just
go with
as-
the
just as
facts.
any other officer report, but we may keep it traditional if you'd like to. Sorry, Forrest, please go ahead.
I make a motion that the chair get his head out of the Robert's Rules rule book and just run the meeting.
Those were my only 2 points. Sorry. I'll make the change for the meeting minutes. I think that will be streamlined. The treasurer's report, financials are always important regardless, and I would like to accept them.
Chair, are you looking for a second on that motion?
Chair's not going to recognize that. I'm sorry.
So in the spirit of formality here, I guess I'll turn it over to the treasurer to give the report. Kidding. So if folks had a chance to review the write-up at the front of the agenda item, gave you kind of the broad outline here. I'll give you that now. We'll run through some of the reports here and then try to tie it all together. So again, this is through December 31st, okay, the first half of our fiscal year. We are running a deficit of about $62,000. And that is after allocating $60,000 of municipal dues. So I don't do math in my head well, but that's about $120,000. It isn't uncommon for us to experience deficits through the first half of the fiscal year. Just the fact that July, August, and December all occur then. However, this is a little bit of a larger deficit than we've experienced in recent years. And there's a couple things that contribute to that, but we'll talk through it a little bit. If I'm able to share my screen, which involves hitting this button and then this one. Folks seeing a balance sheet? Excellent, thank you. So we won't spend a ton of time here, but a couple of interesting things to look at, which are our cash balances. The money market account is our reserve funds. So that's over $500,000. That's nice to see. Checking account at 319. That's not amazing, but definitely acceptable at the end of December. A pretty hefty accounts receivable sum here. Again, not completely out of the question. You're looking at a balance sheet that was booked right at the end of the month. So that's when all of these receivables are booked. I'll scroll down a little more. This is all a lot of CPA stuff, things the auditors like to do to our balance sheet, so I won't spend a lot of time there. Accounts payable is real. So we can see that our receivables are nearly twice our payables, so that's a good ratio to have. That means we're expecting twice as much money to come in than we have to write checks for. So all of that equates to total current liabilities 1.4. And I'm sorry, I missed our assets. And our total current assets are nearly twice that. So again, good ratio. That's just a factor of solvency. Are we able to meet our obligations in the short term? So that's a good thing to see. The other interesting things I'll point out about this are, again, these items are more CPA auditor stuff, but deferred income ACCD, those are ACCD funds. Don't worry, we get these in quarterly installments. So we'll receive the remaining half of this. So the fact that that's 19,000 halfway through the year is okay. More significant are deferred income communities are our municipal dues, and 187,000 is a nice balance to see halfway through the year. There's a reason why that balance is high relative to the budget year. And I'll get into that a little more as we scroll down. Any questions before I move on to the revenues versus expenses? Not hearing or seeing any, so we will do this. I'll try to scroll in a relatively kind way. Okay, so as I mentioned in the memo, our two, largest single sources of revenue are our ACCD funds, which are mostly here in 4 and 5. We have a little bit down here in 12. These are running at about, when we add all these up, closer to 47%. Halfway through the fiscal year, so that's a little bit behind. And then the other line that I mentioned here, this is an important one, this row 19 is basically our staff billing for the transportation program. Not to pick on them, but that is also a little bit behind the budget year at 46%, okay? As we go down through the rest of these, I'll take any questions on these, but these are our natural resource, our brownfields, energy grants, et cetera. And down at the bottom, emergency management. The bottom line here is that we're a little bit behind on our operations support. Read that as staff time billing, okay? 47% halfway through the fiscal year. As we go down to the expense side, we can see that we are relatively on target. We're not usually exactly right on salaries, but pretty darn close, 50%. That's pretty good. Benefits are running a little behind, which is also nice. So altogether, we're basically right on target for the expense side halfway through the fiscal year at 49%. So, you know, this deficit that we're looking at is really sort of coming from the revenue side. And that just means that we need to get more billable, more hours dedicated to projects in the latter half of the fiscal year. Went through that pretty fast. Any questions or observations on this? Bart?
Forrest, I realize I
Yes,
should
sir.
probably know the answer to this, but a lot of these state grants are paid by invoice. Is that how those take place?
A majority of them are, Bart, and they're on a reimbursement basis. Okay. That's certainly the case with the transportation billing, which is our single largest source. ACCD is on an installment situation that's paid quarterly. There are a couple here and there that also pay on installments. For the most part, though, and even the ones that are paid on installments, that income needs to be earned. For that revenue needs to be earned. That means we need to bill for it. We need to actually accrue expenses against it before we can actually say that it's ours, right? Whether we have it in the bank or not.
Yeah, so you have to show expenses at any rate that are then reimbursed or covered. So the other point I'll make is the conversation about revenue and productivity, sort of direct productivity is impacted by things like holidays, vacation, other kinds of leave, and then other internal activities like strategic planning sessions for which it's not a billable service. If people are in the room for the day, obviously they're not billing for services for that day. So those are just reminders of, I guess, what's obvious to all of us. For what
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you know, those things are important, but it does have that effect. Yep. I think Joe maybe was next.
Yeah, thanks. I guess my question is probably pretty simple. It's just my lack of understanding of accounting. When you say that there's a $60,000 deficit, I just don't see where that is in all of these numbers. You know, and it seems like, and that's not a real problem, right? I mean, maybe that's just a like a cash flow, not even a cash flow problem. I'm not even sure what you mean when you say there's a deficit, when it seems like the assets are so much greater than the liabilities, and there's all this accounts receivable kind of out there. So can you explain that a little bit more? And where does that 60,000, how do you compute that 60,000? Like it's what minus what equals 60,000 from all of these numbers that are there?
Sure. Yeah. So that very basically is revenue. So it's earned. So the top of this, it's not an income statement, revenue versus expenses. All of these numbers coming down to the bottom here on the right-hand side are adding up to this total revenue number.
Okay.
And then down here, all of the expenses are adding up to this other number. So the math is actually, you know, it's a fairly simple equation. There's a lot that goes into it, Joe, but basically at the end of the day, it's just a subtraction.
All right.
Okay. So that says that we've earned this much revenue. We've incurred these many expenses over this set amount of time. Did our revenues exceed or did they exactly equal, or were they less than the expenses? And that's whether you have a
Okay.
surplus or a deficit.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. I got it.
And
And
then
so,
go ahead.
okay, keep going. Sorry.
So no problem. The assets, et cetera, the money in the bank account, those are considered more balance sheet items. So that's really, you know, what you have in the bank, money that you owe, et cetera. And with accrual-based accounting, there is a separation between, you know, income or surpluses and deficits. The net income or the surplus is actually just one line on your balance sheet. It's just one aspect of your overall financial health here. And the balance sheet reflects more of like, okay, we have this, you know, we have this many receivables, we have these many payables, et cetera. So it's really just one factor that factors in to the overall financial health of the organization. However, we're an organization that is basically, we're not building up, we're not trying to like build up assets and make a lot of investments, et cetera. Like really when it comes down to the financial health of our organization, it really does come down to revenues and expenses for us for the most part, right? We're a fairly liquid organization in that way. So that's probably why we spend more time really looking here than looking at the balance sheet, but both are important and they both relate to each other.
All right. So when you forecast, I assume you do kind of forecast this forward for the rest of the year. It generally works out, I assume. And that's just happens to be where the RPC is at that point in time.
Indeed. I mean, it's certainly our goal. You know, when we're building the budget, right, that's the forecast for the entire year, right? So about a year ago, we thought at the end of the year we would end up here with, you know, $31,000 to the good. So that was sort of the projection, if you will, at the time. But you know, as reality presents itself, you know, we have to adjust. We do a mid-year adjustment, maybe to get what you're asking. This number is, you know, it's not amazing. I'd like to see it lower. I don't see it as insurmountable. I think we'll be okay at the end of the year, but you know, these are kind of the facts that we have now.
Okay. Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah, I hope that.
Yep.
If
I can put a finer point on that. This is more negative than we usually are halfway through the year. So I did kind of emphasize to staff the need to reduce admin time and increase billable time, even by a % or two, you know, in terms of what they do each month. I do believe, as Forrest said, that we should be able to dig out and get pretty close to zero by the end of the fiscal year.
Jeff?
I'm gonna make the motion that the board accept the financial report.
Second that.
And as part of my discussion, I'm going to express concern over being at 28.5% of our direct project revenue at this point in the fiscal year. And the executive committee knows that I have some concerns that we have staff on extended leave. And, you know, we're now into mid-March and there's not a lot of time to go out and get help with subs. So I am concerned about that. And I'm not indicting our leave policy. It's just we have a lot of people who have taken extended leave over this period of time, and being at 28.5% of a $6.4 million revenue item through midpoint of the year is not good. And we have the healthy balance sheet is an artifact of us really watching this and being very persistent on this, that allowed us to get to the point where we have those financial items on our balance sheet so we can deal with issues. The other thing that I want to know is, for a lot of years, when we weren't in this situation,
Jeff, I don't know if you can hear us, but you're frozen.
and is that allocation of local dues that basically went to our bottom line, is that larger than usual? And what portion of that is going for matching funds on MPO projects?
Unfortunately,
words-
Jeff, you,
In other
Yeah.
words, Forrest, what I'm trying to get at is,
yeah.
we're at 60,000, but how much of that is through some smoke and mirrors?
When you say 60,000 of us using dues, or are you talking about the 60,000?
No, 60,000 net with a $120,000 transfer in local dues into our revenue side. What was that for? Because in the past, we had always used that for match and not to make up for underbillings in some of our direct project revenue. And we don't have to resolve it. The executive committee, and you know, I've already expressed concern about whether we have enough staffing to do what we need to do on direct revenue to carry all of our overhead, which is no longer unsubstantial.
Yeah. There's several points you made. Let me kind of try to go through the layers of the onion here. One, on line
I'll go back to
7.
sharing if that helps.
Yeah, line 7 of the income and expenses, you can see the $60,000 local dues transfer into revenue. Sorry, or there you are, line 7. So that is true, Jeff. And we've been the last few years when our ACCD money has gone up. You can see that we've been using some of that on row 21. So we already used $100,000 of state money to match the MPO funds. So yeah, we would normally, allocate all those dues at some point during the year. We did fast forward 60,000 of them to close a budget gap, is true. But they all get used or pulled in at some point during the year, right? Like
Right. So all I'm saying, Charlie, if you don't mind me just interjecting, is, we don't normally do that in December to make an otherwise not great looking bottom line number look worse than it was.
Yeah, we did have to do it last year also, or I think we did, but it was a smaller amount, maybe 30 or 40,000. I can't remember exactly. Forrest may remember, but
I don't want to belabor the point.
Yeah,
on it.
The points you're making are important, Jeff, and I do want to address the staff management issue. So we do have we've had two babies born in the last 6 to 9 months. So we have had 2 maternity or paternity leaves. The one happening right now has no consultant project management responsibility. So it's not impacting that 28% of the consultant dollars flowing through. And I do hear you that does not look great. We're always kind of like chasing our tail there. And the consultant dollars have been going up. And our ability to get that all the way through, for some of it is sometimes something happening with the town. Some of it's on us and how quickly we get things going or moving. But there are dynamics there. So message received. So thank you for looking at the detail.
Okay. So Jeff has made a motion to accept the financial reports as given. He has also pointed out some of the harbingers of doom in this case, maybe, but I think it's more underbilling and the need to get more billable hours and get folks in here who can provide those billable hours in order for us to get the revenue that we need to offset the expenses that
Can
we
I
have.
recategorize that a little, Chris?
Sure. Go
and
ahead.
just say, yes, the numbers for the operating year aren't great, but the fact that we've had good operating years in the past have allowed us to build up a financial cushion so that we could absorb a rough year.
Mhm.
And I just didn't want the members to go away thinking that this could potentially be a rough year. Maybe not as bad as it looks, on a straight line basis here. And we have the capacity to absorb a negative number. We just don't want it to be as big as it's
A trend.
tracking.
Right.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
if I can just say clearly, I believe we will get very close to zero in terms of, income matching or revenue matching expenses by the end of the fiscal year. And so, Jeff, I appreciate that we do have a balance built up, right? And I'm hoping this isn't the year we need it, but we, in the coming next couple of years, we could need it. So,
Well, and this might have implications if we don't watch this carefully on our direct overhead rate too.
yep.
Fair enough. Any further points any members would like to make before we vote? Okay, then all those who would like to accept the financials, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
And
Aye.
so anyone opposed or abstaining, please speak up. Okay. Thank you, Forrest.
Thank you.
We'll move on to agenda item 7, Buell's Gore's plan approval, which will include both the plan approval and the process that they went through for this plan.
Chris, I'll take that. I'll let Garrett interject here in a second. Can folks see the memo in the packet? Excellent. So you'll see a memo in your packet with a staff recommendation at the bottom that the board approve the Buell's Gore plan and confirm the Gore's planning process. Buell's Gore completed a municipal plan at the end of 2025. That plan was reviewed by our staff and then by our PAC, our Planning Advisory Committee. It is their responsibility to provide the board with a recommendation on municipal plan approval. And they've done so. Garrett, I don't know if you want to speak to the Gore's process at all, but from staff's perspective, this is a pretty straightforward regional approval and confirmation.
It was the end of 24, not 25.
Sorry,
We
not
haven't quite
25.
hit
Where am
that
I?
yet.
What year is it? 24.
Yeah, as you say, pretty straightforward. The planning commission worked and worked and worked, and the regional planning commission helped hugely in this, and staff were really wonderful in helping tiny towns, uneducated planning commission in doing this, and it wouldn't have gotten done without staff help. So thank you.
Great, go ahead, Bart.
Garrett, can you remind all of us what the population of Buell's Gore is, just for some context?
It's up. It's in the low 30s, as in 32 or 3.
And the number of commissioners?
The number of commissioners, that's one. That's me.
No,
On the planning commission, we've got pretty close to a third of the registered voters. Actually, a little over a third of the registered voters. There's 6 folks on the planning commission right now. And Gore is a little different for those who don't know. The residents have no say. The voters have no say. The Gore supervisor, actually the supervisor of unorganized towns and Gores of Chittenden County, Jake Perkinson, is the town government who is a dictator and gets to approve or not approve. He, like many past supervisors, has taken the advice of residents and voters and not gone against those, but legally he's not required to. But the meeting where the Gore plan was adopted was unanimous in supporting his accepting it and approving it. So Jake is the equivalent of a select board.
Great. All right, we'll be looking for a motion to
I'll make one.
the 2024 Buell's Gore plan and confirm Buell's Gore's process in the planning of that. Thank you. A second for Eric.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Joe Segali. Further discussion? All right, then all those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstaining, please speak up. This is a municipal action, so does Buell's Gore even get to vote on their own plan?
Yes, towns do get to,
All right, good.
and even unorganized towns.
I like that. Get confused with the MPO. Okay, we're gonna move on.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Garrett. Move on to agenda item 8, draft board and committee member handbook and code of conduct. You have been given this in your packet previously, and I'm not sure if you've got your memo on page 21, which describes the background and process of this. Catherine or someone on staff wish to speak closer to this?
Emma, do you want to speak to it or?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yeah, so in your packet, you do have that memo that kind of outlines the background and process for this board and committee member handbook and code of conduct. This is, I think, the third time the board is seeing it. The executive committee has also seen it a number of times. The last time you saw it was January 15th. And at that point, there weren't any of the fancy graphics. It was just the text. And at that point, there were a few suggestions made by members, most of which were minor text edits. And then the sort of the primary one was to remove or to extract the formal conflict resolution process from the overall handbook. And so we did that and presented it at the executive committee meeting. And they had recommended putting it in as an appendix. So that's sort of the main change that you'll see from the last time that you saw it, other than, again, the graphics and it being displayed in a more visually appealing way, hopefully a friendlier way. And the last time that we had made updates to this was back in 2013. So certainly needed it. We took a more modernized approach and tried to make it more accessible and actually usable as well. So I would welcome any questions or comments if there are any.
If there are none, we'd be looking for action to endorse and recommend, but with this, what kind of action do we need that this be implemented, correct?
I move we approve
Thank you.
the handbook with the edits that Emma was talking about.
And that were sent to you this past
I'll
week.
second.
Thank you, Jackie. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Anyone opposed or abstaining, please speak up. All right, thank you. I'm going to move to item 9. The chair is charged Board Development Committee for the fiscal year 26 officer nominations. So I suspect I have to encourage you, Catherine, to begin the process to choose a new chair at our June meeting, and a new vice chair and a new secretary, and to find us a new representative for towns larger than 5,000 population, and find us a representative for towns less than 5,000 population. And then also assign find a past chair and assign them the duties of both the nominating committee in which you serve now and the bylaw committee in which you've just had a hand in helping us with the employee and board and committee member handbook and code of conduct. Have I got that correct, Catherine?
Yes.
All right, then you are so charged. Any further notes?
Nope, we'll just be calling people.
All right, it's not going to be a challenging year, I hope. I think you have a deep bench. I hope so.
I think so. It looks, these are all great people.
All right, love it. So these are great opportunities, especially for towns greater than 5,000 population, towns less than 5,000 populations, and our brewing needs for vice chairs, secretaries, and so on. Thank you. All right, we will move on to agenda item 10, Act 181 implementation presentation, including our favorite, the first draft of the FLU, or future land use map, that will get everybody excited.
It will. Please promise not to click on any links until after my presentation. I don't want everyone looking at the map for the next hour. I got a couple things I do need to tell you before you go take a peek.
But my Sharpie is poised.
Your Sharpie is poised, and to that point, you can do it in Sharpie, or you can do it on our fancy new map viewer, where you can digitally provide public comment on the draft future land use map.
Sharpies
Melanie,
only work on hurricanes.
okay. Draft future regional future land use map viewer was completed today, thanks to Melanie. Link is in this presentation, which Emma has now posted to the website on the board page. If you do want to use Sharpie, there are PDF static maps of each municipality also posted on the Ecos engagement page. So if you want to print that out, made hard copy notes and send it to me. I don't encourage you to do that, but if you want to, you can, and email them to me. We have essentially a 2-month period in which we're taking public comment on the draft future land use map. Our hope is to close public comment on May 19th, summarize comment in the next couple days, and have summarized public comment on the map available and posted by Friday, May 23rd. Everything related to the regional futures land use map is on our Ecos engagement page. I'll be linking to that several times. Here's a picture of Kate in Huntington. Joe could probably tell us more about what happened that day. I believe this is at town meeting. But this is just one example of what our staff's been doing out in all of your municipalities over the last several months. And so here we've got a board, and we're taking public comments, in written form about the draft map itself. To summarize a little bit, since January 1st, 2025, our staff's held 35 meetings or events in municipalities with municipal boards or other kinds of community events. We have also held 6 focus groups with regional and statewide stakeholders with over 66 attendees, held over 9 key informant interviews from folks ranging from Chief Don Stevens to Liz Curry, who's a woman who works with mobile home parks in Chittenden County. And so we really feel like we're, not to make light of our earlier conversation, we've got a lot of billable hours the first 3 months of this year doing work related to the Ecos plan and the development of this regional future land use map. There are a lot more upcoming events in the next 3 months now that this draft map is out there in the world. You can again see those events organized by municipality on our Ecos engagement page. I know we also have at least 3 or 4 focus groups to follow up with some of those communities we worked with last year when we were doing engagement focus on economic justice populations. So I think we have an Arabic focused focus group to loop back with the same people that we talked to last year, and as well as a few other languages. I also want to use this slide to pitch that we'll be holding our semi-annual regional housing convening on April 30th at Kula. It starts at 5:30 p.m. You should have gotten a save the date already. If not, let Emma or I know. Emma will be sending out an email probably next week to register for that event. We are asking for registration because we are a little bit space constrained. And the focus of that housing committee is really going to be on the map and on the municipal housing targets, which I'll talk about in a second. Any comments so far in terms of process or where we are with the map viewer? hearing none, I'll move on to do what I hope to do the next few months, which is try to summarize or distill down a couple of the common themes or really important things that we think we're hearing when we're doing this engagement work. And so this is really what we've heard between mid-February and mid-March 2025. And this is both with municipal meetings and with our focus groups. There's a lot of concern about the map's influence on housing choice in rural areas, and a lot of concern about of really restricting the amount of land available to development in our rural municipalities, and therefore really restricting the amount of housing development that can happen there, and ending up in 25 years as having very wealthy rural enclaves in which smaller units aren't available, and folks that don't look like me aren't able to live there. And there's also just a great concern about the map's ability to influence whether or not that housing is affordable. We can talk more about that in a bit, but definitely a lot of what we're hearing when we're talking about the map. There's a lot of folks that we're talking with are really asking for greater clarity about what municipalities will need to take on when Act 250 theoretically takes away, if a municipality is a Tier 1B or a Tier 1A municipality. We've heard some continued confusion. This came up at our last board meeting too in Westford about the non-equivalence between our rural conservation layer on the map and Tier 3, which is that area that's going to be defined via rulemaking with the Land Use Review Board. That's going to be really restrictive in terms of Act 250 jurisdiction. And so that just continues to come up. We continue to try to address it without prejudging what people are saying, but trying to explain at least our understanding of the situation. We had a focus group focused specifically on folks that do economic development work, and they were particularly worried about or concerned or questioned how we're categorizing industrial parks or commercial parks within the region. You'll see on the map that we kind of characterize them in different ways depending on what's around them. And so for a place like Tech Park in South Burlington, we've categorized them as a planned growth area because that commercial park is really within the context of a larger mixed-use neighborhood. Whereas Catamount Industrial Park in Milton, that's been shown as an enterprise area because it's very much separate, detached from an area where we have, frankly, people living. A couple more things. We've talked with Bolton Valley Resort a couple times. They're not very happy about being grouped into the resource-based recreation land use category. As staff, we feel like we have to do that based off the statutory definition, but their base lodge area and the area around it right now is shown as a village area on our existing future land use map, and so they're feeling like it's a step back. And this is something else that other RPCs have been hearing too from some ski resorts. I think no RPCs have changed, but that is something that is coming up statewide. I think as you've seen or you've heard tonight with my other comments is that a lot of folks really want to get more granular than the elevation we're talking about with this regional future land use map. This regional map is very general about kind of land uses across and land uses and scale of development and those sorts of things across a very, very large landscape. A lot of people, when we're talking to them, really want to talk about things that have to do with municipal decision making and municipal planning and zoning. And so I just want to highlight that because you all are on select boards or on planning commissions, and folks are really worried about having enough housing. Frankly, I think that's more common than even folks worried about ensuring we have enough area conserved to meet our climate goals. And a lot of what they're talking about, a lot of what they want to influence is municipal zoning. In terms of equity, environmental benefits and burdens, that really comes back, I think, again, to that ability to have housing choice, particularly as someone of lower income. If you want to live in a rural area, you've got the ability to live in a rural area. If you want to live in an urban area, you have the ability to live there. If you want to live in a suburban area, you have that ability. But again, a lot of questions about how our map influences that kind of choice in the next 25 years. that a lot of folks really stressing the importance that our map needs to reflect the fact that we need to be really resilient, particularly around our rivers, even as we try to achieve our smart growth goals. And so just a lot of folks kind of bringing up that tension between ensuring that we've got dense walkable development, but we have it in areas that are not prone to flooding in particular. That's a lot. Any questions on those common themes that we're hearing?
Haley, Bart, just one comment about flooding. You know, historically, people have talked about the problem is the river is rising, but in some of our towns, like where there are more hills and mountains, it's not just the river rising, it's the watershed is coming down off the hills and mountains and wiping things out. And the Bolton Valley Road is an example of that, where it wasn't flooded from below, it was flooded from above. So it's just a wrinkle for those of you who don't live in a hilly or mountainous area.
Fluvial erosion, as the technical term. And yeah, Bart's right. I mean, most of the flooding that we experience in Vermont, frankly, is more of that erosion type than the typical inundation, slow rise of water type. And yeah, those river corridors that the state defines, those areas that are prone to erosion, are generally shown as rural conservation on our existing map, or on our draft map that's out there in the world. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to move on to draft housing targets. I didn't know if I was going to talk to you about housing targets tonight or not, because PAC is up until about 3:30 today been debating about the methodology to use to disaggregate municipal housing targets. And so before I get into the context of the slide, I just want to remind board members that PAC has been thinking about a methodology or a way to fairly disaggregate the municipal housing targets for over a year. Did a lot of work last spring. We took a break in the summer. And then once we got the regional housing targets in January, we started to reconvene and try to work out how to divide the target amongst our municipalities. There's a lot of detail to how we're dividing the target, but I want to just give you the kind of high level overview and then look at the draft numbers that we plan on releasing later this month. And so we divided our municipalities into 3 different groups: urban, rural, and a mix of urban and rural. And you can see on the slide how they're divided. After quite a bit of debate, we've decided to assign 60% of the regional housing target to our urban municipalities. And that's not something that we did unilaterally as staff, and that's something that had a lot of discussion at PAC, and frankly, those municipalities, or at least the PAC representatives of those municipalities, feel pretty strongly about having or taking 60% of the regional housing target. And the reasoning behind that is really, from their perspective and from staff's perspective, really reinforces our resiliency goals as a region. It's about locating housing in our existing urban areas on public transit where we have water and wastewater infrastructure already. It's about being efficient with our public dollars. It's about achieving our climate goals. And that's the reasoning behind that relatively high target for our just 4 municipalities. Our rural municipalities, they're going to end up with about 3.8% of the rural target, or sorry, the regional target, excuse me. It's a little convoluted to explain, so I will stay brief, but essentially right now, the rural municipalities account for 7.6% of the regional housing stock. So half of that is what we're giving them for a target. It's a recognition that those municipalities have a lot of working lands, not a lot of infrastructure. And the reality is, in the conversation of those municipalities is about how to get infrastructure and about where to grow within those municipalities to ensure that we are getting some smart growth outcomes over the longer term. The remainder, after we do the urbans and the rurals, is what gets allocated to our mix of urban and rural municipalities. So these are all municipalities that have water or wastewater, but then have a traditional village, but then also a lot of rural area. And so for these municipalities, they end up with 36.2% of the regional housing target, and that target is divided essentially based on the map, on that draft map that you can see on that map viewer. And so those areas that Those municipalities with larger acreages that are designated as planned for growth, as centers, or as planned growth areas, those municipalities tend to have higher targets. We also did a little bit of weighting on that map, depending on whether or not that geography was serviced by water or wastewater, or just one of those things, or neither. So when we do that, I'm gonna show this slide real quick, and then I'm gonna go to a more informative slide in a second. This is what we end up with in terms of the housing target for 2030 and for 2050. And as you can see, for both time periods, we have a low, medium, and high target. The low and the high target are based off the regional housing target we received from ACCD back in January. I'm going to go to the next slide before you ask questions, because this, from my perspective, is more of what matters. And we can go back if needed. But from our perspective, the 2050 target matters a whole lot more than the 2030 target. 2030 target, basically that housing's already got to be in the pipeline if it's going to get built by 2030. We don't have a lot of control, either as an RPC or a municipality, or even in the private sector, to try to achieve that goal. It's really about 2050. And so you see here is our existing number of housing units by municipality. And then here is our 2050 low target here, our 2050 mid target, and our 2050 high target. And the percentages you see with those targets is essentially a percentage of growth based on the existing number of units. So in here in Bolton, we're expecting by 2050 that in the low scenario, that they only grow by 59 units or 11% growth over a 25-year time period. Pretty low there. It's a rural municipality. Whereas, somewhat higher in South Burlington, 38% growth, 700 units, or almost 3,800. The low scenario essentially represents business as usual. 15,000 plus units over a 25-year time period. That's kind of what we've been doing, frankly. And so that's low, probably not what we want to aim for to solve the housing crisis, business as usual. The high, on the other hand, is very ambitious, very high. It is also a scenario where if we are going to be more resilient and have a financially successful public transit system and have walkable places and not be spending a lot on our infrastructure, it's more of the scenario we may want to aim for, despite that target being very high at 47,000. And then we've developed this mid target, which is honestly the target that staff's been most focused on. Is we want to make sure at least that mid target for every municipality is achievable and isn't too scary. Over here to the right, before you, I'm very interested in questions. You can see the annualized historic growth rate between 2000 and 2023 by municipality. And then you see what the annualized target is for the low, medium, and high scenarios for each municipality. And you can kind of do a comparison between the annual here in Bolton, annualized growth rate. It's been about 6 units a year for the past 23 years. In the mid scenario, they're going to be building about 5 units a year. That's the goal. Bolton is the exception. Everyone else is challenged in the mid scenario or has a higher target than their annualized growth rate. In South Burlington, you can see opposite side of the spectrum, very ambitious. They've been doing about 142 units a year, more in recent years, more like 175 units the past decade. In the mid scenario, they're going to be asked to do over 300 units a year. So with that, I'll pause and open up the floor for any questions. Or everyone will just stare in shock silence while they absorb their municipal housing targets.
Taylor?
Yes, Mike.
So can you go back to the breakdown of urban and rural and mixed?
Yes, I can.
So I'm just wondering, on the urban, and obviously coming from Winooski, that's what's prompting my question. Is there capacity, and especially Burlington, Essex Junction, and Winooski, to meet these goals?
We can talk about capacity in a couple different ways, right? We can talk about, does the zoning allow for it? Does the wastewater system allow for it? Is there physically just enough space, even if the zoning allows for it? Mike, I've had conversations with Revy, and from Revy's perspective, just looking at zoning and potentially developable land, the target for Winooski should be achievable. I think there might be a little bit of wastewater capacity concerns on the back end of the 2025 target. I don't take that to the bank. I can talk to you more about that offline. But yes, in Winooski, there should be enough capacity to hit that 2015, at least that mid target, if not the high.
Okay. And the goals for the next 25 years, as you said, are above the last 20-year average for most towns.
Yes.
Is that because of the targets that ACCD gave, and the way it fell out was that, well, okay, everyone's gonna increase their housing in Chittenden County?
Yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's an equation. ACCD gave us a target, and that the targets that they gave us are, factoring in, what kind of housing needs to be built in order to normalize the vacancy rate, right? Or to replace housing stock that's coming offline due to deterioration, or to essentially get to a place where housing prices stabilize for home ownership. Charlie, help me out here. What else am I missing? How's the homeless? And so yeah, it's the targets are a recognition that we have not been producing housing at the rate that we need to have a healthy housing market.
Do you know if other counties are in the same kind of situation as we are? In other words, it seems like our targets are high.
Yes.
Is that kind of statewide, the way ACCD put the numbers out? Or do you know? Maybe you don't know. I don't know.
I know enough to be dangerous, Mike, but I'll let Charlie step in.
Yeah, it's a good question. We can take a look at that. I do think on the high scenario, I think our percent is bigger than the rest of the counties in the state. I think it's partly that's just like where infrastructure capacity is, or frankly, our sewer and water systems cover a lot bigger part of our county than the rest of the state or any other county, right? And I'm not sure what math it was at ACCD or VHFA who did the technical work, but like what that actually, what caused us to have a higher share. But I think it would, we're like 26% of the population right now. I think it would increase our share rather than kind of maintain everybody's share, is my sense, but I'm not sure about that.
Okay, thanks.
Jackie.
This is probably like, I think I know the answer, but no, don't go back up
Nope,
to where
nope,
you
okay,
were.
okay.
I'd love to know what in the urban divided by land area and floor/ceiling, like, is that height restrictions or height, removing height restrictions?
Thank you for bringing me back to that very key detail that I left out. And I'm trying to keep everyone out of the weeds, but this is a little weedy. And so the urban target is divided by how much land you have. We didn't get into the map, mostly because it's a lot of planned growth area and a lot of center, except for South Burlington. They're a bit of an outlier. There's some rural there. And so when we just divide by land area, without a floor and a ceiling, and so kind of a governor on the top municipality and kind of a floor on the lowest municipality, South Burlington ends up with a target that's way above even Burlington.
Okay.
And so what we did is we put a ceiling in that says that no urban municipality shall take more than 40% of the urban target. And on the floor side, we said no urban municipality shall take less than 7% of the urban target. That's Winooski, Mike. And so we kind of we played around and waited a little bit to for fairness' sake, because otherwise South Burlington absorbs almost, I mean, I don't know, almost more than half of that urban target.
And just one more question, could any of this include rehabilitation of like housing that already exists that is just so substandard, nobody wants to live in it? And I mean, I don't know what that kind of inventory is, but it feels like there's, we have a very aging inventory of housing in the whole state, right?
Mm-hmm. We have the second oldest housing stock, I think, the entire country by state. I think Maine might be the only one that's oldest or that's older. We've been thinking about this kind of in more of the pure new units perspective, Jackie. But to be frank, I haven't really thought about it in terms of coming back online. I see Charlie's off mute. Charlie, what do you have to add?
I will say a good share, I don't think it's a majority, but a significant share has been redevelopment that already is happening here. I'm thinking about, in Winooski, right? We've seen some smaller, older homes get torn down and now there's an apartment building there.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing, I think we can expect to continue. Essex Junction, had, an old apartment building. I can't remember how many 100-something units, and now it's a new building with 200-something units. So I do think redevelopment is going to be a significant aspect of what happens here.
Okay, thanks.
Hard.
Yeah, I think this is stimulating. My wheels are turning, like, given our baseline numbers, where X number of houses could possibly go. And each town here, or municipality, has its own story about the opportunities and obstacles, I think.
Yes.
So those are going to be unique, and it's going to be a variety of factors. One of the things for the small towns, it's not so obvious if you live in an urban city or town. The rural road standards really restrict driveway access in a lot of places, especially where there are hills and curves. Like, no, you can't put a driveway there. So that's assuming you wanted to put a driveway with its own water and septic system to do that in developments on poor soils is pretty tough. And so that's one of the reasons, not only Act 250 and zoning, why you get a nice big house on a lot of acres. It also has to do with that kind of infrastructure question. And then I have a broader question about how to say this. The impact of our workforce and the supply chain, including tariffs, on the feasibility of construction of large number of houses. I just see those as sort of constraints or guardrails, at least in the near term. And on top of that, immigration policy, where some of the workers that I've seen even in our small town may not be here for future construction cycles.
I wish I could answer that question, but I will just agree and make that a statement, Bart, or make those, statements. Yeah, workforce is going to be constraining, as will costs. Joe?
Yeah, I want to say first that I think this is really helpful and useful. In Huntington, we're starting our plan update. I, talked to Taylor and Kate about this, and it's just having a number that I think is reasonable. And there, maybe someone could quibble with the methodology a little bit here or there, but it gives us like a reasonable number to work with. And when we start thinking about, well, where do we want this housing to go? What does it mean? And all of that. So I think this is really helpful. And I have just one specific question. Taylor, when you said that, I think outside of the urban areas, how the allocation of the housing target was based on the map, on the future land use map. So what do you mean by that exactly? Because you also said it was kind of related to, or maybe it was the overall distribution was related to the number of housing. But anyway, what do you mean by, can you give an example of how the map, or maybe the land use categories in the map, influenced where how the housing was allocated?
Yes, I can do that. So I want to be specific that we're kind of treating each category differently. And that in the urbans, it's just like we give you a target, we divide it by land area, we have the floor and the ceiling. With the rurals, we essentially just say you're going to grow at a slower rate. And if you look at this here, you'll see all, in the lowest scenario, all the rurals are growing 11%. If you look at the mid, they're all growing by 21%. So we're just, there we're essentially, you're going to grow rural municipality, you're all going to grow at the same rate. With the mix of urban and rurals, that's the category, Joe, that we are using the map to divide the target. And so essentially we have our 5 categories that are planned for growth. We have our downtown centers, village centers, planned growth areas, village areas in transition. And then we have those, and we have those that are serviced by water and wastewater. We have those that are not. And then we have 10% rural on top, because we have a regional goal of 90% growth in areas planned for growth, 10% not in rural. And then essentially we do a mapping exercise. We extract the acreages, and then we do some weighting in the background, and then we pop out a target at the end. For some folks that are interested, I can go into more detail probably offline about that. But yeah, we're using the map to allocate in those municipalities.
Okay, thank you.
Miles.
Yeah, Taylor, I've been looking at the map, and I do see that there's an opportunity to comment. Like, you can click on properties and comment on how it's listed in the category it's in. Is that something we should do as just individual, as citizens of Chittenden County, or is the board itself going to sort of scrutinize that map and make sure the properties are classified right? I mean, I saw, for instance, in Burlington, the Callahan Park is identified as a village. Burlington Country Club is identified as a village. So there's some tweaking of that map. And is that going to be our deal? Are we going to do that, or do we do that individually?
Good question. I believe both those parks are shown as planned growth areas.
Okay.
And I
It's
can give you
hard to tell,
reasoning
planned growth or village,
about
yes.
that. But Miles, I think you can comment as an individual. And then, it will be the responsibility of the long range planning committee to first kind of scrutinize the map after we receive public comment. LRPC will be doing that in June and July, and then eventually will be the responsibility of the board to scrutinize the map and make sure the board's okay with it.
But after all the public comment, after the committees review it, so the staff, will bring you a recommendation that hopefully resolves 90-something% of the issues.
Correct. Jeff.
Thank you. Taylor, in reading the VHCB study and understanding what Housing and Community Affairs did to establish the targets, you look at the labor requirement, even to meet the mid target, okay, which in some of our communities requires a doubling on an average annual basis to even get to the mid target by 2050. That completely ignores business cycles, which I think what Bard raised earlier about what's going on with tariffs and things is of concern. And you can say that what's going to be built by 2030 already has to be in the pipeline. Just because a unit is in the pipeline doesn't mean it's going to get built. Okay.
Fair. Very fair.
And secondly, I just want to reemphasize the immigration policy. The trades in the construction industry, in some cases, have more than 1 in 3 workers that are in the immigrant or illegal immigrant category. Okay. And, it's fine to look at physical constraints of infrastructure, but if you don't look at the labor market constraints, I mean, for example, in Vermont, over 65 workers that are participating in the labor force, or 26% of people over 65 are participating in the labor force versus 19% on the national level. But over 65 participants in the labor force aren't going to be the people who are going to be stilt spackling. They're not going to be climbing the roofs and doing roofing and things like that. And I know we were takers on the state targets that came from the VHBA, but it seems to me that they did all this in-depth work on getting to a smoothly functioning market, housing the homeless, without any consideration of whether the supply side could deliver even the mid-range of these units, which require some communities, for example, Burlington, to get to the mid-range, they got to have a 4-time increase in the number of housing units that they have historically done over the last 25 years. And South Burlington's got to more than double just to get to the mid-range. Reality is probably somewhere between the low and the mid-range, even if everything goes right on the business cycle, interest rate, financial, and immigration fronts. And that's just my estimation in looking at this. But it seems to me that these need to be portrayed as living targets that need to be refined, and we need to go down the next level of refinement, which deals with the capacity of the supply side to deliver units. We had a pants on fire housing shortage in the northwest part of the state in 2000. We still have a pants on fire housing situation in 2025. We are not going to get over this by 2050. So at some point in time, we've got to figure out a way how to work with our friends at DHCA and VHCB and all the folks that are involved in housing and get away from these numbers that I agree they need to be aggressive. But Joe, I take issue with the fact that it's a reasonable methodology. I don't think even at the mid-range, it's a reasonable methodology. It's a statement of what we need and what these things should be telling us, just how unachievable it is to get our housing markets back in what is considered traditional working order without some fairly significant policy changes that'll assist on the supply side of this. The supply side doesn't have a prayer of meeting even the mid-range on this. And that wasn't a question, it's just hoping that the lopsidedness in the methodology starts to take into account in a better way. And, you know, maybe I've beat Alex Farrell, who's a well-intentioned commissioner, over the head with this, as well as Tate Brooks, who's the deputy secretary down at ACCD, over this. But it is not credible from the standpoint of the capacity of the economy to deliver, even talking about the mid-range at this. You're going to need 40,000 jobs in construction, you know, to get to the high range. You're probably going to need 25,000 jobs in construction over the next 25 years to get to the mid-range. And that's not going to happen, particularly not without immigrants. Because I'll tell you, the people that are living here and are aging as part of the baby boomers aren't going to be climbing ladders and aren't going to be using nail guns because they'll put them through their feet.
I mean, I'm trying to get my dad to not go on ladders anymore, Jeff. Proactive. Yes. I'm trying to keep him off. No,
I don't even climb ladders to clean my gutters anymore.
I agree with most of what you just said, and I think a couple of things. I think those conversations, those points you've made, need to continue to be made, and they can be made in our regional plan too. And I think we do a pretty good job in the SEDS talking about that in particular, and in the workforce challenges that exist. I think we have the number that we have now, and but this will evolve over time, and if the state does change the targets in the future, we'll change with them. But yeah, you bring a reality to the targets, Jeff. I agree.
All I want is the same level and degree of rigor in establishing the aspirational targets on the other side of the reality of the supply chain to be able to develop on the aspirational targets. We're not going to be able to get the unemployment, the vacancy rates to a market standard. We're not going to be able to put all the homeless in a housing unit, and we need to start to think about a probability weighting of the various unit creation levels so that we have credibility in terms of the target. You take some of these targets to some of the legislative bodies. If I was sitting on the city council in South Burlington, I'd laugh these targets out of the room.
So to that point, I can't agree or disagree with you. I'll say that, we've certainly relied on the PAC and those planning directors and their communications with their select boards and with their city managers in formulating the methodology that we have used. Again, I don't disagree with you, Jeff. But we have tried to have that open communication during the development of this methodology to make sure that we're not missing the mark too much on what's possible politically.
I wasn't even talking about politically.
Yeah,
I mean,
I know.
you should sit through a municipal level hearing on changing the wastewater core in your town to accommodate a housing project that sits adjacent to the core. I mean, I'm not even talking about that.
Tomorrow morning, I'm sitting with the friendly folks from Beach Cove in Shelburne to talk about zoning changes. Jeff, I hear you. Any other questions, comments on the numbers, on the method? Okay, so next steps. Well, what I don't have on this slide is that these draft housing targets, we want to sit with them. We just, PAC just approved this methodology or said they want to move forward with this methodology a couple hours ago. We hope to get them out in the world for public scrutiny by the end of March. And they likely will be posted on that same page where that map viewer is located. Like I said earlier, public comment on both the map and the plan and the housing targets, or that shouldn't say ECOS plan, that should say housing targets. That's open until May 19th, 2025. We're then going to aggregate all the things that we've heard, try to summarize it, and then go back to our municipal planning commissions and select boards to make sure there's comfort with the map, comfort with the housing targets, and then seek select board action specifically on that Tier 1B request, opting into Tier 1B. And then we'll wrap up working with the LRPC and you folks this summer and fall to try to get the ECOS plan into a state where we're ready to start the public hearing process. Any questions on timeline? If you have any questions, you can email me. Like I said earlier, Emma posted this up on the board website, so you can take a look at the presentation. And my contact information is here. Thank you for all the really great questions and frankly concerns about the housing targets. We agree that they're going to be a challenge, and we're just hoping to work towards trying to alleviate those challenges as much as we can here as a region.
Well, thank you for putting on your armor and wading in there, Taylor. So as Jeff points out, even at the smallest level with wastewater and developments right next to the wastewater plant, it's challenging. And this will mark the beginning of what's going to be a challenging summer into the fall and trying to roll these out. Folks in South Burlington are probably going to be, as he pointed out, aghast at the thought that you're going to double the housing stock in town over the course of the next 25 years.
Can I interject on that real quick, Chris? Because I feel like I left one thing out.
Sure.
To that point about aghast residents, our staff is working diligently to frame the messaging around the housing targets to the extent that we can, and kind of developing a set of regional talking points and even trying to get some municipal talking points available. And so we're hoping to be prepared to answer those aghast questions when we receive them from folks in municipalities.
Right, and talking points will be one thing, but people are going to be bandying about numbers and just getting excited, especially when they see maps. It really draws out the most out of us, I think. So anyhow, this will be exciting.
Taylor, is this on the website yet, or is it going to be soon, or what? Because I just looked for find housing targets and I don't see it.
Haven't had a second yet. The only thing I've done to them is make a JPEG and put them in the presentation. But I'm hoping
just
they're
a few
on the
hours
website.
old.
Yeah, probably by the end of next week, Jeff, if not earlier.
Can you alert us when they go on, please?
Yes, sir. I can do that.
Because I don't like keeping secrets from my legislative body.
Big news. I'm sure your planning commissioner, director of planning and zoning won't be keeping that secret, Jeff.
Oh, he is on the pack, but I just want to make sure that we can put the right context on this too. And I mean, I understand, Charlie, that there's no ramifications for not missing housing targets. And I would phrase that yet. And we always have to be concerned with mission creep on this. Particularly if there's a change in administrations at some point in time in Montpelier.
Great.
And, yeah. And
Thank you.
Yeah, Chris, can I add one more thing? Just because I just want to add the perspective of we are, trying to turn a very large ship here that has been going in one direction, and really outside of Chittenden County, like there hasn't been a lot of growth happening in the state, right? And so I think this is the last couple of years and I've only been here for 17 years. So, but this is the last 2 years of the first time that I started to hear the legislature talk positively about growth in the state, frankly, at all. And so this is, we have 30 years of kind of no growth, a policy agenda almost I'll say in the legislature, in the state generally. And so this is a big ship to turn, and it's going to take a while. And certainly all those issues that Jeff mentioned are real. So it's not going to be an easy thing by any stretch. But it is just starting to turn a very slow moving large ship. So anyway, I'll knock on wood on that.
Again, thank you for getting out and about to all the cities and towns for that.
Yeah, and please, our staff, we've got, I think, 4 or 5 planners that are working with the various towns. Hopefully they're talking to your planning commission. If you want them to talk to your select board or join you in talking to your select board, please be in touch. We're happy to do that. Whatever conversations need to happen, we want to support.
Okay, great. We'll move on then to agenda item 11. The legislature requested Regional Planning Commission study, the executive summary, where you can view that on pages 94 and 95 of your appendix, which was sent to you separately.
So this is another thing besides housing targets that were in Act 181 was a study of how RPCs could, how well we're serving our towns and how we might be able to better serve our towns, how we could be more effective and functional. So we just got this, I guess on February 28th. So a couple weeks ago. I wanted to make sure you had it. It's been delivered to the legislature, and obviously they have a lot of things on their plate right now. So I don't think this is getting a lot of attention yet, but I do think next year it may get some more attention as we're just trying to figure out as a state how to do more with less. And I think this is maybe a small part of that process. And I wanted you as our board to be aware of what kinds of things were in the recommendation. So I'm just looking at page 2 of that 16-page summary. It's got kind of just an outline of the recommendations there. And some of it is about that Council of Governments idea that would make it easier for towns to share services. But that's a whole evolution. If the legislature does want that to happen, it would take some time. There's some conversation in here about just how we communicate with like state agencies and how we work as a state association, because the RPCs are typically providing the same services from state agencies that they're asking us to deliver to towns, and how we work with that. And then some things on equity and accountability. But I really just wanted to kind of make sure you're aware of this and answer any questions if I can. I don't know if this raised any questions for folks. And I did also, I think Emma made a note. There was the larger report, and there's a large group of appendices. If you remember, there was a survey of you all, select board chairs, and town managers, administrators in September or October. I can't remember exactly when, but if you want to see those results, I was on, I think, pages 94 to 95 in the appendix document. So anyway, I think, Chris, that's all I want to kind of share, and happy to take any questions or feedback.
Sure. Anyone have questions for Charlie on the recommendations to shift to Council of Governments model? Go ahead, Bart.
Charlie, given our watching of what's going on with federal and state money and the relationship there, any comments you'd make about the financial implications of this? Like, what does this mean in terms of funding infrastructure?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the best way to answer that question, because I could go in multiple directions. I mean, I think I'll express it as a hope that maybe a different governance model might make it, number one, make it easier for towns to work together. And I think in a reduced federal funding assistance scenario that we seem to be starting, I think we're gonna have to look to each other and how to help each other through things. The state as well. So I think this is more about getting more efficient and effective with what we got, and not being as reliant on the federal government. Andy, sorry.
Charlie, you mentioned an appendix document. Where is that? Where is that? We only have the executive summary.
Yeah, that was the email that Emma, she just put it in the chat, but the email that this was transmitted to you in last week had a couple other links, and that reference to page 94 and 95. Or you can go to the chat here and get the link. And you'll see 3 documents at that link: the executive summary, the full report, and the appendix.
All right, great, thanks.
Charlie, it seems like there's lots of good reasons for that council government structure, and but I didn't really see, and maybe I didn't read it close enough, but I didn't see any of the downside. I mean, what are the downsides from your perspective, or are there any downsides?
Yeah, I don't, that's a good question, Joe. I mean, most states have already moved or authorized that kind of model. Even the states around us have at least enabled council of governments, if not outright required. I don't know. The downside, I think, is maybe the politics. If it gets a little bit more elected official driven, and there end up being more political issues that come to the table, that could be a downside potentially. One of the states that they looked at a little bit, and honestly, I think we've been looking at for a number of years, is Connecticut, which about 10 years ago went through a major transition. I can't remember, they had like maybe 11 RPCs and MPOs and things, and they did some statutory work and then went through a process over a year or two, and consolidated down, I think maybe to 9. And Jeff unmuted, so maybe he knows more details.
Well, just so everybody's aware, they went from a county-based approach to a planning commission approach, which is raising hell with the economic statistics, because all the economic statistics collected by the Census Bureau and the Labor Department have county orientations, and all the other states, except for Connecticut, which has gone to a planning commission approach, where they've actually taken counties and put them together and made a planning commission on it and collecting that. So my question was going to be, why are we looking at that when we've got some states like Connecticut, which are going back in the opposite direction?
Well, they actually went in this direction, just the boundaries were funky. Yeah, and Jeff, I believe they went back to the Census Bureau and asked the Census Bureau to start tracking, I don't know, maybe just during the census at the whatever the COG level, whatever they're calling them, So yeah, I'm sure there's the data analytics,
It's a mess.
which are
It's a
challenging in Vermont now for the southern part of the state, right? Like,
Yeah, well, we're going in the direction where we're now going to eliminate data. It's just kind of like when the second Bush administration decided to eliminate a category of household income, so it could eliminate the one category of household income, which had most of the housing cost pressures. Okay, if you don't have any data of housing cost pressures, you obviously don't have it, and that's just so. I'm getting to the end of my career, but I'm seeing this. I mean, the Commerce Department and the Department of Labor both eliminated a committee that the professionals interfaced with the government people to improve the statistical series that are being reported. And for the Commerce Department, which includes the Census Bureau and the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the new secretary just said, mission accomplished, we're disbanding it. About 2 weeks after he said he was going to eliminate federal government expenditure activity from the US GDP accounts, so that nobody has to worry about the negative impacts of Dodge. We're just not going to collect them and report them.
I don't think this was getting there, but good issue related.
Well, Council of Governments also has some issues with some ways it can open up funding opportunities, but at other times the COGs become competitors for municipal funds. So it's not all, I mean, the thing when I read it that I kind of winced on was that it seems to come from a perspective that COG is the way to go. And I'm not sure that that's true. I've done a lot of work in states with Council of Governments, and it's not all daisies and roses.
There you go, Joe. There's your answer.
Yeah, maybe we'll get more specifics on that one. So this if it happens, there'll be more discussion next year in the legislature potentially, and maybe a bill or something like that. And there'll be more of maybe like a more complete analysis of the pluses and the minuses. The risks might be better. What are the risks of making a shift like that?
The shared services model that allows municipalities to share services, like some of our communities are too small to have really a significant planning staff. That in and of itself may be enough and be a benefit to go to COGS, but I just don't want everybody to think that we're only going to get the benefits and none of the downsides.
No, yeah, there will be something, unintended consequences for sure will happen. But yeah, and Joe, yeah, my sense is talking to the chairs of the GovOps committees is, this was a little bit the subject area where they started up that county and regional governance study committee last year that the two GovOps chairs chaired. Obviously they're busy during the session, but both chairs have kind of, unsolicited kind of said, we're going to get back to that and reboot that committee up after the session ends. And they had already taken some testimony from folks and stuff. And I think we're getting some interest in this idea. So I wouldn't be surprised if it gets discussed more at that committee is probably where it'll be looked at in the summer, fall, and then some legislation. And my recollection, was Connecticut, they basically set up a process so that local governments could participate in even which COG did they want to be in, or, and so there was some realignment and things that happened. And it took, I can't remember if it took 18 or 24 months or something, but it's very state legislature driven in Connecticut, which is the only model I've seen where this has come up recently. A lot of states authorized COGs decades ago.
Which is cause for concern, because that'll take on the life of how we define SEDS areas, which should be based on the economic interactions and commuting patterns and things like that, and not what the politicals think is a good idea to be with this COG versus that COG, because then we'll mess things up even more. But that's okay. I'll be dust by the time the real crap happens.
Any other questions for Charlie on any of the recommendations of the RPC study? And I will again refer those who want to go deeper detail, page 94, 95 on the link that Emma put in the chat, because you will get to see our own board's responses summarized and your local elected officials' responses summarized.
Oh, and I missed, Emma actually even put the link to where the appendices and things are right on the agenda of this meeting. So apologies, I just noticed that, Emma. So thank you for trying to make sure we're fully communicating.
Well, thank you. So nothing this year, but maybe they'll begin to work on it next year. Any other thoughts, folks? Ready to move on? We will go to agenda item 12, the outreach and engagement update. Irmela has put together a one-pager that you will find on the last page of your board packet. Are there any questions or comments about her update for today, March 19th? You can see they were working on the future land use map and with focus groups and Vermont Commission on Native American Affairs, going over the public participation plan and stipend policy, issuing a letter of intent to the Robert Johnson Foundation to see if we can then do a full application with them, and heading the February meeting. Thoughts? Comments? All right. If none, we will move on to item 13. Thank you, Irmela. Filling in for, we had an update on Ann Nelson, Charlie? I've forgotten.
Oh, as in like, did she have a baby?
Yes, I think the board would love to hear some more.
Yeah, that is a really, and now I'm struggling as to when that date was. Was it like February 22nd?
That's right, February 22nd.
Woof. That was close.
Nice job.
So, yeah, which, I don't know, was that just after your last board meeting? But, so I think that Saturday, yeah, she had a baby boy, Ray is his name. And actually, I just texted with her today. Baby, mama and daddy are doing just fine. And, you know, sleep deprived as you might expect, but all is good. So thanks for asking about her.
Good. Well, I hope to continue to hear good things, and I know it'll be a busy time for her.
Yeah. And Chris just made reference, but Irmela, we've brought her on at like 20 hours a week to kind of pick up some of the work that Ann Nelson was doing. So sorry, Jeff, I'm reminded of our budget conversation earlier. So, you know, we have, you know, added a little staff capacity to try to get through this leave period here. So.
Not that it necessarily has billable hours attached there, but.
Oh, no, it's billable hours.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear. I haven't gotten that deep in the weeds. All right, let's move on to agenda item 13. I'm going to start for once with a recap that we were able to complete Charlie's executive director evaluation today. Thankfully, I fired off the completed review. You'll note that on a scale of 1 through 5, where 5 was outstanding, the executive board felt that he had performed 5 outstanding this past year. And due to a number of factors. Number one, I think, is his general management style has been productive over the last 17 years. But number two, we've had increased workload, increased staffing, and multiple challenges with the ACCD funding and work that came with it. So we're pleased with the compensation study that he did last year that helped us with staff. Jeff referenced it earlier as far as maybe we overshot something, but we'll see. At the same time, we're very happy to be able to retain employees. We have the 22 staff. They filled out in part of our process of evaluating Charlie. We engaged a consultant. So if you go back to your financials with Forrest, you'll see that we're probably a $10,000 charge on the consultant line that was 100% on the side, but I think it was well worth it in that they gave us a good baseline and targets for working on work groups that Charlie has put together in response to the employee survey that we had. And this was all after our compensation study last summer. So we completed that over December, January of this year. It was helpful in the evaluation of Charlie. It told us that the folks who work here, the 22 folks who would like to continue to work here for the most part, that was mostly scaled on a 1 through 4 scale, with 4 being the top end. So they got high marks for wanting to continue to work here 2 years from now. And we got high marks for Charlie as the executive director as well. There were some weaker points about conflict within the workplace, nothing disastrous, just softer numbers that weren't up at the 4 scale, or thankfully not down at the 2 scale either. But we also had workload, which wasn't surprising considering what we've been dealing with this last year. Jeff's plea for more help in order to get some billable hours and get product output out the door. So overall, we feel very strongly about Charlie's performance. We do note the 2 areas that were softer in the conflict, which was just not, it was very vague. Employees felt that we don't necessarily handle the conflict as well as we could, but they couldn't tell us what conflict that was. So it's one of those things where you're asked, you know, does the company handle conflict well? And you're like, well, I have petty grievances, but I don't want to speak to them. And therefore, I'm going to not give it the highest marks possible. But again, giving Charlie credit, he's given 2 sub-work groups with employees in a retreat and session, and where he tried to get the team to address some of these issues. Number 1 on the workload, they're working on that. And number 2 on what is it that we need to do to feel that people are addressing conflict and what that conflict may be. And it could just be the tension of workload, and maybe they're busy and doing too much work, and and other folks aren't. Or it could be more generational, as we alluded to as well, where folks my age versus folks my daughter's age might not see the workplace in the same lens. So we'll see how that works out, but they are working on it. Any questions on any of that on our evaluation? Okay. Again, 20 of the 22 staff did respond on the survey, so we're quite happy. Charlie's got work groups working on those areas. So we're very, very pleased. So thank you, Charlie.
No, thank you, Chris, and thanks to the executive committee. I appreciate you actually really digging in, I think, in a little deeper way this year than we had in previous years. So I appreciate that. What, just to address the conflict just for a moment, because it sounded a little scary.
Sorry.
The conflict is a kind of it's a weird word. It can be used in lots of different contexts, right? And I just want to reassure you, it's the conflicts that we're talking about are typically like disagreements over, or maybe just different opinions about how to move forward on a project or something, or some policy issue, and not personal conflicts. So I just want to let you know, I think the staff is really doing a great job of working together and supporting each other. And I think it's a really core part of the culture of helping each other. Yeah, as we're dealing with, up and down workload things, I think the whole staff is very responsive to each other when there's needs to help out. So
sounds good. I mean, it can be the difference between a traditionalist like myself saying, let's do it the way we've always done it, and somebody coming along and saying, let's try something new. And, and I pull rank and say, no, we're going to continue to do it the way I've done it.
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely. So anyway, a few other updates. The FY26 Unified Planning Work Program. So our budget and work program for next year is being drafted right now. We're going to bring it to the UPWP committee for their meeting on Tuesday. Thank you, Bard, for chairing that committee. I think last month we told you, I can't remember the exact number of projects we got, but it fit within our available funding to do the projects. So no, we didn't have to say no to anybody. And we have, you know, finished the eligibility review with Federal Highway and VTrans. There were a couple partner projects that we're working with to kind of refine their scope a little bit, to just make sure they stay in that eligible category, particularly as things are shifting a bit in terms of federal government direction on how funds can be used. Sorry, I don't mean to talk in code, but you know, we're trying to make sure they're not focused on the equity things and not focused on the climate things, right? Have been, to use a couple words, although there's a few more that are being reviewed for. So we're just trying to make sure we are in good situation when it gets to any federal review. And I will say, you know, at this, whenever we do the first draft of the budget, it always looks a little negative. So I'm not going to tell you what the budget looks like yet, because I don't believe the numbers I'm seeing. So, but we'll refine that over the coming weeks, and bring the first draft of it to the executive committee for April, and they'll warn the public hearing, and you'll see it at your April meeting. So. Thanks for the vote on warning the public hearing in advance. The federal executive order implications, and I can't remember how much of this conversation we had last month, but I think I have a little bit better sense of what's happening this month than I did last month. So if we separate federal funding into two groups, so there's one batch of federal funding where Congress specifically authorize specific spending. And that holds true for the transportation funding and the MPO funding. And when I say transportation funding, I mean the money that goes to VTrans is by formula that Congress voted on. And so the administration can't really, they don't have discretion on that. That's the law. And so those funds, including our MPO funds, are continuing to flow. There was a little bit of a question about a review that happened a few weeks ago, but they kind of pulled back from that on transportation projects. And then the other second pot of money are where Congress gives a batch of money, let's say $1 billion for this program. Administration, you go execute. That's where the administration has quite a bit of discretion. My sense of within that discretionary pot, there's also kind of two pots. One where the funding has already been, it's under contract and obligated. That money is still flowing. Our RAISE grant, you may remember we got a $2 million RAISE grant a couple of years ago. That is fully obligated. It's all, the paperwork is signed and executed. And we did just, it was really just a week ago that we finally got clarity on that from the Federal Transit Administration. So far, no major impacts for us. The other pot under the discretionary are obviously things that are not fully obligated or haven't, maybe they told somebody they got an award, but they haven't actually entered into the agreements yet. Those are the things, that's the funding that's really at risk, that's getting reviewed. And again, I don't think they're pulling everything, only things that they are, not consistent with the administration's policy. So does that help frame that a little bit? We haven't seen any direct impacts here yet. In our organization, I did hear about Winooski, and Mike, I don't know if you heard about part of the one grant that was part of the Main Street construction project for street trees. Must not have been fully obligated or fully committed to yet. And so I heard that got pulled. But that's the only significant impact I've heard in our region so far. With regards to our stuff, I'm sure there's maybe other things going on in human services world or education world that I'm not aware of. Sorry, I don't mean to open up a giant can of worms, but any questions on what I just said? I'm trying to be somewhat reassuring. I don't know if it's working. Okay, I'll go with yes. Legislative updates. There's a housing bill both in the House and the Senate, two separate bills that are going to cross over here soon, and then they'll trade stories, trade bills, and work on it. I guess the notable thing to me in the housing bills is that they are not reopening the things that they did in Act 181. And from what I can tell, there doesn't seem to be much policy push on or any significant changes on municipal issues like there was 2 years ago with Act 47, where they kind of updated zoning requirements and things like that. So anyway, not a lot of municipal implications that I'm seeing in the two housing bills. So it's mostly funding housing programs. They are looking at some finance vehicles, thanks, Joe. They're like kind of small type of TIF type of financing things are being discussed. So I think that's maybe an opportunity if something does move through, but I think a big question of whether it gets through the Ways and Means and Finance committees.
Charlie, that was project-based TIF for housing only though, right? It wasn't for broader commercial things that I know was being discussed.
Yeah, I think what the administration proposed was a little broader, and I think it may be getting talked about in two committees, Jeff. One committee is narrowing it just to housing, and the other committee still has it a little bit broader. But so I'm not sure where that will shake out at the end. And so much of it depends on the Finance and Ways and Means committees, whether they're really okay with using some of the education property tax funding.
Exactly. Because, I mean, anything that has to do with TIF means that the community can freeze their education property tax liability and get 75 or 80% of that money locked in for them to fund infrastructure projects to support housing over the next 25 to 30 years, as opposed to, or 20 to 30 years, depending upon what bill you look at. I honestly didn't even think it would get this far, and even for housing.
Yeah, and I guess the state auditor weighed in a predictable way in the last day or two. So we'll see what happens. And other than that, I will happy to take any questions. That's all I've got, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Asking for agenda item 14, any members items? Seeing none, I'll refer you to agenda 15, the committee liaison activities and report, those 8 committees that are on their web pages below, hyperlinked on your packet. And we can move on to
Move we adjourn.
agenda 16, adjourn. Thank you, Jeff.
Second.
Thank you, Bard. All those in favor, please hit leave or say aye, and all those who disagree or want to abstain, hang around and tell us why.
Thank you all.
In a
Great
haiku.
to see you all. Thank you.
You all be safe.
Bye, everyone. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Carry on.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.